guys, welcome back to Legally Bound. If this is your first time joining us, we are Andy and Katie Cherkasky. We're both former federal prosecutors. We practice criminal defense work now, and among other things. And we are commentators on all of the major networks on all the top legal stories and some political stories. So we spend a lot of time giving legal advice to our clients,
true.
to
All
the
day
nation,
long.
and
Our
even
clients, and really family and friends, whoever calls and asks.
Yeah, so for that purpose, we're going to tell YouTube all about the biggest topic that every Karen out there wants to know. Even though there's a law in most places that you have to wear a mask when you go into stores and restaurants, do you really have to? Is there a way to get around that?
Yeah, what about the American with Disability Act? What if you have troubles breathing? What if you've got any number of even quasi-legitimate reasons why you don't want to wear a mask? Mm-hmm. Is there a way around it, or is
that the
this
rule
just
for
the
everybody?
way it is?
So even if I have a card that says I have a disability, I can't breathe well when I'm wearing a mask,
right,
therefore I'm not going to wear a mask. We've all seen the videos, Trader Joe's videos, infamous at this point. But is that a legitimate legal answer?
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. The only law that would really allow for an exception where a state or a business has decided to go with a mandatory mask rule. Because you've got to remember, there's a difference between government and there's a difference between private businesses. Private businesses can have their own rules. So even if the local area doesn't require masks, a business can, and then will be only subject to the American with Disability Act. So the American with Disability Act essentially says that businesses have to provide accommodations for those with legitimate disabilities, and those accommodations is where we start to have to divide it apart when we're talking about masks today during COVID.
Right, and the first piece that you actually have to have before you can fall under the Americans with Disabilities Act is a disability. And that's not just you saying, hey, I feel like I can't breathe well with a mask. I probably have a disability. That would not be a disability. It's a legal definition. It has to be something that actually is diagnosed typically, that is determined to be something that falls under the ADA, because not every disability actually is protected under the ADA for every purpose.
And that could be between that individual and the business. HIPAA doesn't really apply to these things. So if it kind of as a very basic, to even have a disability that would qualify as a consideration for something that a business would have to allow you to not wear a mask for, mm-hmm, you would first have to go through a pretty tremendous amount of proof from medical doctors ultimately, right, that the disability would prevent that behavior.
This goes without saying, but the disability actually has to be related to the accommodation you're seeking. Right. So if you have no legs, that doesn't mean that you can't wear a mask. That's, even though it's a disability, that's not protected. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's not like I have a disability, therefore I have a carte blanche to do whatever I want, no matter what the law is. Right. That's not the case. So the disability obviously has to be something that would be impacted by the wearing of a mask in this case, since that's what we're talking about. And if so, is there something that the business should do or could do to accommodate you?
Okay, so that's the important question. So you've got your doctor's note. You went to a doctor, a real doctor, who wrote you a note and said that this person is suffering from such a severe disability of whatever breathing type, etc., that they cannot wear a mask, that would be dangerous to their health, and they are disabled in that regard. So you've got that letter in hand.
Yes.
You want to go to the business. Now what? What sort of accommodations do they have to provide you, and is there a way that they don't have to provide that?
Sure. So even if you have this determined disability, and even if it relates to wearing a mask, the business doesn't just automatically have to say, okay, come on in, you don't have to wear a mask, no big deal. They actually have the opportunity to provide what they call a reasonable accommodation to try to allow you to receive the services, but in a way that wouldn't also put other people at risk. So it's a balancing act.
Or deviate from what that business typically does. So
exactly.
They can't be forced to deliver it to your home, but maybe they could bring it out to the curbside for you. You could order over the phone or online. You could have somebody take it even through the doorway. And I've seen in many of those videos, those businesses have offered to do that.
Yeah, and then these people just want to make a scene, or
you don't have to be given the same opportunity, the same experience that somebody else. It's, if you want to buy a product, you tell them the product, they bring it to the door.
And if it's reasonable
they will
enough,
definitely be allowed to do that.
Yeah.
But the final real answer to this is that the American with Disability Act also includes a clause is called the direct threat clause. So that a business, if to allow you in or to allow the accommodation would cause a direct threat to health or safety, they can just deny it entirely. And the American with Disability Act wouldn't apply to that. So many businesses have gone that route. I think we see that certainly in the airline industry. Depending on the nature of your business, I think you'd have a very good argument to make that the direct threat right now during COVID would protect you in that regard. So even if the accommodations aren't being done sufficiently, I think most businesses can get away with the idea that it was a direct threat, at least until COVID
to some degree,
significantly reduces.
Exactly. And so, most places, from what I've seen, they're willing to try to work with people who are legitimately looking for an alternative, not just trying to be a pain in the ass, potentially, and say, I don't want to wear a mask and therefore I'm not going to. Well, that's not going to qualify. And there are people that obviously have legitimate reasons and medical reasons that they cannot, and they can go through that process. And if a business doesn't accommodate them, they could potentially be held liable in a lawsuit. So businesses have a lot to be careful with in that regard, but people can't just come out across and bully them and say, I'm not going to do it, because that's just not the law. So these Karen videos out there, they should check the law a little more clearly before they put themselves on the internet forever, declaring
And
things that are not the
potentially
case.
arrested themselves.
Right, exactly. I don't think that's worth it. So if you think you have strong legal grounds to do something, I hope that you've looked into it a little more. Maybe they'll come across this video and say, okay, I got to do a little more before I go to this Trader Joe's.
I don't
without
like
my
the
mask.
mask that much either.
No, I
but
don't
you
like
gotta
it either.
wear
I can't even breathe.
If they say you got to wear it
But not-
and you want to go
but
to
not
that place,
officially.
put your mask on. Until next time, we are legally bound.